Check, mic check, testing 1, 2, 3. Good to see everyone here today. Good to be back with you. We are starting a new series today, and I'm glad to get to kick it off. Some of you were in the class that just completed reading and thinking about this little book and the challenging message it gives. It's called Surprise the World, The 5 Habits of Highly Missional People. And we're wanting to be a more missional people here. We want to learn better how to live God's mission into the world around us. And this book is a very simple, practical way of thinking about some ways that we could do that in our lives. And so for the next several weeks, we're going to walk through this as the whole church, because most of us weren't able to be a part of that class. So I'm going to kind of kick it off, introduce it today, and then I'll say more that later about kind of the rest of the series and some of the speakers that we have that are going to join us. But if you haven't picked up a copy of this, we'd encourage you to get one and kind of read along with it each week as you hear it. And if you're gone a week, I know it's vacation season now, please go back and catch the message online. Listen to the video of what you missed. Stay with us as we go through this series. I think you'll really find it helpful and a blessing and encouragement as you live your life following Jesus. Feel free to turn your chair around if it's uncomfortable. We're going to talk around our tables in a minute. So in the book, right at the beginning, in the introduction, he said something that got me to thinking. He said he's not suggesting that these 5 habits that we're going to talk about, they're listed on the left. We'll talk about them in a minute. But he said these 5 habits are a handy tool for mobilizing Christians up, in, and out into mission. That is, up into a deeper connection with the triune God, into a stronger sense of community, and out into the neighborhood. Up, in, and out. Simple way to kind of think about our lives as Christians. Up in our relationship with God, in our relationship with each other, out into the community around us. And I got to thinking about our mission statement that we developed here about a year ago, and we've talked off and on about this. So I know you've seen it. But that our mission here at NODA is to equip one another to follow Jesus in the communities where we meet here at NODA and where we live around the city, making a difference in the lives of our neighbors. That's really the core of our mission statement. And then what follows is a little bit of a vision of how we, part of how we hope to accomplish that mission in the neighborhood around us. We want to reach the young adults moving into NODA. We want to serve children and families. We want to grow our dynamic partnership with the Y here and with others in our community and be a church that's focused on the needs of others. So you've seen that phrase, but I want you to look again at that first sentence, that core of the mission. As I was reflecting on what he was saying in the book, I was thinking about our mission, and I realized up, in, and out is in that first sentence. Up. We're following Jesus. It's our relationship with our Lord. In, we're equipping each other. We live in this relationship with each other, encouraging each other, equipping each other, growing together as followers of Jesus. And out, making a difference in the lives of our neighbors. It's a simple way to think about what it is we're called to be and do as followers of Jesus. But we could really take that mission statement and just kind of summarize it by saying the NODA Church is a community of people who follow Jesus, equip each other, and make a difference. That's who we are. Does that make sense? Way to think about it. Way to kind of hang on a little bit to what it is that we've said we want to be and do. But how do we do that? How do you go about living this missional life that makes a difference? And in the book, in the opening chapter, he suggests that we need to live questionable lives. Now, that doesn't sound good to me. I think of the word questionable. I think, somebody's doing something that's questionable. I don't know if they ought to be doing that. But he's using it with a little bit of a twist. He means living our lives in a way that makes other people ask questions. What prompts people to notice, to wonder, why do we do what we do? Why do we live the way we live? And he suggests that this is a better way to think about evangelism. So some of us have grown up in church environments where evangelism may have given us a little bit of a bad taste in our mouth. For some of us, evangelism is somebody showing up and knocking on the door and asking, if you died today, are you going to hell? Some of us grew up in places where we were pressured to feel like we had to do door-knocking campaigns, or we had to memorize evangelistic spiels and pressure people all the time. And it just gave us this bad. I feel guilty. I'm supposed to be an evangelist, but I don't like being that kind of evangelist, right? Then others of us have had experiences in churches where evangelism was basically inviting people to church. And then we just kind of become salespeople for what's good about church, And church becomes this place where we try to create a marketable experience. Somebody will have a positive experience and come back the second time. And Frost, the author of the book, suggests that let me just read here. He says, one way of thinking about this places too high a set of expectations on us. After all, we're not all gifted as evangelists. Paul says that's a gift that some are given in the church, not everyone. But when we pressure everybody to go be evangelists, we're pressuring people to do what the Spirit may not have gifted them to do. And he says the other way of thinking about evangelism reduces us to church marketers whose primary role is to advertise the church's benefits. I don't really want to be either of those. I don't want to be a high-pressure person who's making me feel guilty and pushing my neighbors away, but I also don't want to just be a marketer for the church. And so Frost is suggesting another way of thinking about our task as people who share the good news of Jesus. And he keys off this verse in Colossians and draws a contrast between the role of those who are gifted as evangelists, like Paul in this case, and hopefully there are going to be those among us who have a gift to talk to people about Jesus and persuade people about Jesus. But he also talks about a role the rest of us can have. So Paul says to the church at Colossae, he says, pray for us that God may open a door for our message so that we may proclaim the mystery of Christ for which I am in chains. Paul was in prison when he wrote this. Pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. You hear, there's a prayer for somebody who's got the gift and responsibility of evangelism, right? Pray that I'll have opportunities and that I'll be bold about it and that I can preach the message boldly, even while I'm in prison. Paul wants to be able to share the message. But then notice what he says to them. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace. That's different than that hammering people with the gospel, isn't it? Let your conversations be full of grace, seasoned with salt so that you may know how to answer everyone. And this is what he means by that, living questionable lives. If we're living this way, wise in the way we act around people, gracious in the way we talk, maybe we'll live in a way that's going to prompt people to ask questions, and we want to be able to answer. And that's just about a normal conversation. Why do you do what you do? Why did you make that choice? Why do you Why do you seem to speak graciously to people in a world that's just attacking all the time? Maybe some choices we make, some things we do, some ways of blessing people and helping people will raise questions, and we just naturally answer them. And then maybe connect them to the Pauls among us at the appropriate time that might do more. This is the vision of evangelism he's talking about. Yes, some will be gifted with evangelism, but all of us can live a life that's wise toward outsiders and ready to answer if somebody asks us about the way we live. Does that make sense? So that's some of what these habits are about. That's really the core point of it, is helping us live a way that might cause others to take notice. So I want to share a little bit of a personal journey on this with you. And I don't come off real well in this story, but I think you'll relate to parts of it. So about 15 years ago now, I left a job preaching at a large church, fairly high-profile sort of thing, to go plant a missional house church. I was working with a couple of church planting organizations. We were doing this experimental thing to see if we could plant a church in the city that met in a home and would grow and multiply. And we were marginally successful. We did some things well. The multiplying part we didn't do so well. But as we were preparing for that, we were working with a couple of church planting agencies, and we would go to workshops and conferences about doing church planting. And one of the things more than one speaker told us we were going to have to do, which really struck home to me as a preacher, he said, you're going to have to get out of your office and go hang out in the coffee shops and the pubs where the people are. I got two problems. One, I'm a Church of Christ preacher. We don't hang out in pubs. Do you understand what I'm saying here? At least not then we didn't. You got men's brewery night. We didn't have men's brewery night at Donaldson. You know, Mike, you know what I mean? Another problem I had is I don't like coffee and I don't like beer. What am I going to do in a coffee shop and a pub? You know, I figured out at Starbucks I could order hot chocolate. Nobody cared. I could sit with a hot cup and everybody's cool. There's no hot chocolate option at the pub. And we moved into the city, moved into this neighborhood. We were making friends in the neighborhood. And the guys in the neighborhood, who for the most part were significantly younger than I was, invited me to join them for Tuesday night trivia night at the pub. Jesus hung out with people. I said, okay, but what am I going to do? There's no hot chocolate options. So I ordered a Bud Light. You know, I know you real beer drinkers, I know, are already turning up your nose, you know, but light beers, not real beer. But you know, I could have something. I would sip on it. I'd get through about half of it in the course of the evening. It wasn't too strong. We were doing this at this pub that was called the Flying Saucer. I think there's one in Charlotte. I'm not sure. There are a few of them around. But at any rate, it's known for having like 200 different kinds of beers from all over the world. And I'm sitting there with a Bud Light. And this is right when Miller came out with that series of commercials. You remember, somebody orders a Bud Light, it's the second unmanly thing you did today. Even the waitress at the pub was making fun of me. But we kidded around, we laughed about it, it was fine. I had my Bud Light, I played trivia with the guys. And then, one night we won. And to celebrate, one of the guys ordered a round of Irish car bombs. If you're laughing at this, you go to men's brewery night, or you've been hanging around, so I don't know, you know. If you don't know what an Irish car bomb, neither did I. I looked down in front of me, and there was a tall glass of Guinness beer. That is a lot more flavorful than Bud Light. and next to it is a little shot of whiskey, Irish whiskey. I hate whiskey. What am I supposed to do with this? And the idea was to pick up the shot glass and drop it down into the glass of beer and drink the whole thing. And I'm sitting there thinking, what do I do? What would Jesus do? I've never faced this dilemma before. There were no classes in ministry at ACU about what to do with an Irish car bomb. And not long after that, I know you want to know what I did, hang on. Not long after that, one of the guys in our group was having a baby. Well, his wife was having a baby. They were having a baby. And they wanted to have a party for him. So they were going to have a diaper party. It's a party. All the guys get together and they bring a bunch of diapers and give them to the dad and hang out together. That's cool. I could do that. Except they were doing it at Hooters. Now let me back up and tell you something. First time probably I ever really thought about Hooters. I was in San Antonio at some kind of theology conference, and we were walking to a Mexican restaurant down on the riverfront in San Antonio, and they had just put a Hooters in there. And one of my close friends in ministry and I were walking past that, going to the Mexican restaurant, and we got to talking about this new thing, because this is right when Hooters were franchising everywhere. And there were the ads, and there was the talk, and we all knew what Hooters stood for. We got to talking about it, and he and I both had daughters that were about 10 years old. And I can remember the conversation, and I can remember him saying, I don't ever want my daughter to grow up and be a Hooters girl. And we made a decision that day. I said, I'm never going to go to Hooters. I had friends later who said, yeah, but they got great wings. Yeah, I know. I know why you read Playboy for the articles. I just said, if I don't ever want my daughter to be a Hooters girl, I'm not going to go to Hooters. That was just a commitment I made. I didn't advertise it. I didn't go on campaigns. I didn't carry signs in front of the stores. I just made a decision. I just wasn't going to go because of that idea in my head of what I wanted for my daughter. Fast forward back to where we were. What do I do? I've been invited to go to a friend's celebration of the birth of his child. I'm called by Jesus to hang out with tax collectors and sinners. What do I do? What would Jesus do? I really didn't know what to do. I wrestled a lot with it. The church where I attend in Nashville, not long after that, well, a little while after that happened, but the minister asked me to come and talk with them some. They were trying to learn how to be more missional, and he wanted me to share some of my experiences in our journey, and he knew about this story I'd told him, and he asked me to share that with the church. I said, are you sure? So we sat up there on a couple of stools, and I told the church what I just told you. And when I got to the end of it, I said this. I said, I'm not going to tell you the choices I made because that's not the point. Not that day, anyway. I'm going to tell you what I did. But so that's not the point. I want to tell you what really was the problem for me. It was why, after 30 years of ministry, was that the first time ever in my adult life that I'd ever had to decide what to do about an Irish car bomb or a party at Hooters. And the reason was because I didn't have any friends. who hung out at the pub or went to Hooters. Because my job was the church, my church was the church, and my friends were the church. My whole life was wrapped up in church. Everything about it. The only friends I had who didn't go to my church were ministers at other churches that I hung out with at the Ministerial Association and became friends with. I didn't have any friends. I didn't hang out with anybody, so I never got invited to their parties. So I'll tell you what I did. Well, so I didn't tell the church what I did. And it got mixed reactions. There were some people that really came up and appreciated me sharing the story and shared some about their own struggles and so on. But my name came up later when we closed our house church and started attending this congregation later. There were a few people who actually objected to me becoming an elder in the church because of that story I just told you. And that's all they knew. They didn't know how it played out. The Irish car bomb, I sat there and I looked and I said, I know Jesus ate and drank with tax collectors and sinners, and they accused him of being a glutton and a drunk. And so as I had to make a momentary decision, I decided Jesus would probably have the drink. So I had the drink. And I was the designated driver at these things usually anyway, and I kind of fit in and everybody was cool with it, and they had a kick out of me drinking it and then wanting to spit it out because it tasted awful, But it was okay. Everybody was cool with it. I don't know if it was the best decision or not, but that seemed like the right thing to do at the time. The Hooters thing was harder. So I finally decided, I talked it over with Judy, I said, I just can't go. But I don't want to come across with these guys all preachy like, I don't go to Hooters. I didn't want to. How do I find a path that doesn't do that isn't judgmental toward people but honors my own values? So I just came up with an excuse not to go. I'm sorry, I have a conflict that night. I ate it. I bought him a bag of diapers and gave them to him anyway, and I didn't go. And later I decided that was the wrong thing. And as I read this book again, I remembered that and how I felt about it and thought, this is why. I had an opportunity to live a questionable life, and I passed on it. I didn't have to come across all preachy, but I had an opportunity to say to guys that I had some credibility with, guys, I would love to come be with you. I really would. I just want you to know that when my daughter was 10 years old, I made this decision that I never wanted her to be a Hooters girl, and so I was never going to go. And I'm sorry, I'm not giving you a hard time. I just can't do it. That would have been an opportunity to maybe spark a conversation, and maybe not. And maybe they would have been a little uncomfortable, or maybe not. And maybe they would have respected the choice I made, and maybe not. But I could have done that without being the judgmental, door-knocking, going to hell kind of person, and still live my values. And that's what Frost is encouraging us to do in this book, is to think about ways to live our lives that might prompt questions from people around us, and being ready in a way I wasn't ready that day to answer a question when it gets asked, in a way that Jesus might answer the question. Now, you can go home and think about it, and you might make different choices on those situations than I made. You might even object to me being an elder here. I hope not. Although I know I'm phasing out anyway. But I do encourage you to think about that. How do we encourage each other, equip each other to live questionable lives? And so he introduces this set of habits that we're going to walk through in the next several weeks. And he kind of introduces them with a line from the psychologist Carl Jung, that you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. And developing these habits is about developing a way of living that's about doing what we say we want to do, living missionally. Because all Christians can say, we believe in the Great Commission. All Christians can say, we follow Jesus. All Christians can say, we want to share the good news. But we are what we do, not what we say we'll do. So how do we do that in a way that isn't just hammering us to go knock doors? How can we do that? And so he's come up with this simple set of habits that we could live our lives in this way on a weekly basis even, that could give us an opportunity to live these questionable lives. And so the first one he talks about is blessing others. To bless. So you'll notice the B-E-L-L-S. They summarize it as bells. It's the kind of bells habits. But B, bless each other. Think about, what if I were to develop a habit of every week I look for an opportunity to bless 3 people? Might be somebody in the church I'm encouraging or blessing or helping. It could be somebody in my neighborhood. It could be somebody at work. How do I just make it a habit in my life where I'm just aware and thinking about and looking for an opportunity to bless somebody, to help somebody, to encourage somebody? The second one is to make a commitment. I'm going to eat with 3 people this week. It might be lunch with somebody at work. It might be coffee with somebody after work on the weekend. It might be having somebody in the neighborhood over for supper. It might be going out with people from church after church for lunch. It might be whatever it is. Eat with people. Be like Jesus, who was constantly eating with people. Something different happens when we're sitting over a table talking, sharing life. What if we made a commitment to do that? That's a part of our lives. And the truth is, in America today, too many hours are tied up in front of the tube. It'll take a habit. It'll take some discipline to say, I'm going to carve a little space out to be with people. The third thing he suggests is listening. Make it a habit. Set aside some time in the week to listen for the Spirit of God. Some time meditating, reading Scripture, time in prayer, listening for God's leading in your life. God might lead you to think about somebody you need to eat with or an opportunity to bless. Or He might encourage you something in your own life you need to work on. Just spending time with God, allowing God to move in you. The fourth one is to learn. I'll spend one period this week learning Christ. That could be in a small group, in a Bible study, in a Sunday school class, personal study. I'm going to commit every week to trying to learn Jesus, to learn more about Jesus. And then finally, as we try to live in a way that is sent into this world, he suggests a good habit is to develop a little bit of a practice of every week, take a few minutes to sit down and write about these other experiences. Just to stop and what journaling does gives you a chance to think back over the week and pay attention to what I did or didn't do. Might even have to journal around what you did with that Hooters invitation. It's just a time to reflect on, who did I eat with? Who did I bless? What did God say to me this week? Whatever it is. And that habit will really help us think about how we're alerting others to God's reign, how we're sharing the good news of the kingdom in the way we live, not just in sermons we preach at people. So those are the habits that he's suggesting, and each week for the next several weeks, we're going to take one of these habits and talk a little bit about what he's suggesting. And he connects each one of them with a value. The habit is the way we live, but we bless others because we value being generous. We eat with people because we value being hospitable. We listen because we value being Spirit-led. We learn Jesus because we value being Christ-like. We're sent because we value being missional. This isn't just about thinking about values. He says it's about developing habits of life that help us live out those values, because we are what we do, not just what we say we do. So I want to take a minute. You notice we're around tables today. We're going to stay around tables through this series, because one of the things we want to do each week is take just a few minutes and talk together. And then on our last week, the elders are going to close out the last week of the series with a time around tables where we'll all talk together and reflect on the things that we've heard in the course of this series and what experiences we've had. But I want you to take just a moment around your table, and if you're sitting by yourself, consider jumping over on the table with somebody else for a few minutes. We're not going to take long with this, but I want you to think a little bit of some experience you've had with living a questionable life or knowing someone who lived a questionable life. So maybe it's some opportunity you had that you say, here's how I handled that. This is the question that was raised, or here's where I missed an opportunity to do that. Or when you were around someone who lived in a way that raised a question and prompted a conversation in you. Maybe another Christian who kind of challenged you and you thought, boy, I hadn't thought of that before. But some experience you've had with living or knowing someone who was living a questionable life. Maybe it's a positive experience, or maybe like me, it was a time where you said, wow, I missed that. Let's take just a moment and share with each other anytime you can think about having done that and how you responded in that situation. So let's take a few minutes and just share with each other. Or maybe say, I can't even think of any time. Seems to have been a lot of conversation going on at the tables. I would like to have sat in on all of them, but maybe everybody just wound up talking about the Metallica concert last night. So. All right, let's wrap this up now. Over the next several weeks, then, we're going to move one by one through these values. Next week, Daniel from PR, who's been here before to speak, is going to be with us to talk about blessing. Then Justin is going to be back with us to talk about eating with people. It's a part of what he does in his apartment ministry, and so he's going to share with us some thoughts about that. Then Troy, has Troy spoken here before? I don't think he has. Troy is also coming over from PR. He's going to be with us to talk about listening, being Spirit-led. I'll be back with you for Learning Christ, and that's 5th Sunday, so get that on your calendar. Remember, 5th Sunday, we're not only going to have the tables out here, we're going to have food. We're going to share together. We're also going to honor teachers that day. It's going to be a special day, but I'll be back with you for that. And then finally, Alex Clayton, who's a retired minister. He now worships at PR. Alex actually preached at the church I preached for in Milwaukee after I was there, so we had that connection. But Alex is going to be here, and I'm sure you'll be blessed by that to talk about that last habit. And then the final week, the shepherds will lead us in a conversation together about this experience of walking through this journey and these habits and what it might mean for our life together going forward. And our hope after that is to have a series on the Sermon on the Mount. One of those values is to learn Christ and let Jesus talk to us some about what it means to live in the kingdom of God for several weeks. So that's what's ahead of us, and hope that you'll join us on that journey. Frost in the book says that mission is both the announcement and the demonstration of God's reign. And that's what we see in the life of Jesus. He both proclaimed the good news of the kingdom, but he lived it out in the way that he helped the poor and the hungry and the sick, the way that he hung out with people, whoever they were. We saw Jesus demonstrate the kingdom of God, but he also proclaimed it. And that's what we want to be as a people who can better share the good news of the kingdom and live it out. It's our calling because we're followers of Jesus. Some time ago, I shared with you the question of what's the difference in being a Christian and a disciple. Christian is just a word that means in some way you're connected to Christ, and all kinds of people claim to be Christian. It may not have much to do with being a disciple. A disciple is a devoted follower of the master teacher. That's what we want to be. That's our mission, is to follow Jesus, to equip each other to follow Jesus. And so we want to think about that. How can we live our lives in a way where we are encouraging each other to truly be followers of Jesus, making a difference in the lives of people around us? And so let's sing a song about following Jesus in his footsteps. Donald, would you lead us?